My name is Robin, and at 37 years old, my daughter spent her cousin's party in the kitchen. They told her she wasn't dressed nicely enough to be out front. She cried in the car. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just took something from the drawer and made them regret everything. If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, let me know where you are watching from. I wish I could tell you I was shocked that I gasped or clutched my chest or pulled some cinematic U-turn in the driveway and stormed back into that mansion with righteous fury. But no, wasn't that kind of moment. It was quieter than that, heavier, like I'd already seen it coming, like my body registered the betrayal before my brain caught up. Sophie climbed into the back seat and closed the door gently, like she didn't want to disturb anything, not even the air. She sat down, smoothed her skirt, and stared out the window like she was watching a funeral procession instead of Brandon's manicured hedges. How was it? I asked, already knowing. She blinked. Fine, then a pause. They didn't let me stay with the other kids. There was the crack in the dam. Her voice was flat, like she'd rehearsed it, like she'd tried out different versions in her head, and landed on the one that sounded the least pathetic. I didn't respond. I let the silence do the work. She swallowed. Aunt Victoria said my dress didn't match the theme. She said maybe I'd be more comfortable in the kitchen with the caterers. As if childhood birthdays now required a dress code and mood board. They gave me a cupcake, she added, like that somehow leveled the scales. Lemon. Her voice broke on the word lemon. And that's when it happened. A shift. Her hands curled into fists around the edge of her skirt, and her eyes finally filled. I didn't even get to give her the present, she whispered. I just sat in the kitchen the whole time. They said it was better that way. I reached into the back seat and placed my hand on her knee. You looked beautiful today, I said softly. She shook her head and wiped her cheek like it was a reflex. They don't think so. No one ever teaches you what to say in moments like that. There's no guidebook for what to tell your 8-year-old daughter when your own family treats her like she doesn't belong. So I didn't say much, just squeezed her leg and started the car. We drove home in silence, the kind where every street light feels like an accusation. Brandon's house was always a monument to overcompensation. Marble staircase, imported tiles, a chandelier in the powder room. He called it minimalist modern, but it always gave the energy of a luxury car showroom, expensive and hollow. Sophie had been excited for the party for weeks. The invitation had arrived in the mail, printed on cardstock so thick it could have doubled as armor. There were gold foil balloons and an RSVP QR code, and a line that read attire dressy. Neutral tones encouraged. I had to Google what that even meant for an 8-year-old. I spent 3 months saving for her outfit. Picked it out second-hand from a resale boutique with filtered lighting and overpriced hair clips. It was a soft blush dress with tiny pearl buttons. And when Sophie tried it on, she twirled and said, "Do I look rich?" and laughed like it was a game. She looked more than rich. She looked radiant, but apparently not radiant enough for Brandon's wife and whatever Pinterest board she'd pulled the party theme from. I should have known. Did know. But I wanted her to feel included, to feel like she had a place. I wanted them to see her. When I picked her up and saw her face, I knew instantly something had gone wrong. It wasn't just that she wasn't smiling. It was the way her shoulders hunched. The way her lip was pressed inward like she was trying to swallow. The whole afternoon I didn't ask questions. I didn't march inside to speak to Victoria or demand answers from Brandon. I just buckled her in, turned the ignition, and drove because I knew there was no explanation they could offer that would fix it. No apology that would wipe it away. There are certain kinds of humiliation that stick, especially when you're 8. Especially when it's delivered with a smile and a slice of lemon cake. When we got home, Sophie went straight to her room without being asked. I heard the closet open, then close, then her little feet pacing, then nothing. Just the silence of someone trying not to cry. Loud enough to be heard through a door. I stood in the kitchen, still holding her party favor bag. Inside was a gold glitter slime tube and a scented eraser shaped like a macaron. Luxury child nonsense. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I walked to the bottom drawer of my desk, opened it and took something out. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just took something from the drawer and made them regret everything. I used to think Brandon and I were just different. That was the word our parents used. Different strikes, different paths. They said it with forced smiles and shrugging eyebrows. Like they were allergic to the truth. Like the truth wasn't that he was always the favorite. And I was always the other one. Sister the shadow. Even when we were little. Brandon had a way of making everything. Mine look like his. Not through theft exactly. Through charm, misdirection. A well-timed compliment followed by a gentle suggestion. You know what would make that even better? He'd say. Then 5 minutes later, he was showing off our invention at the dinner table. And I was just nodding. One time I made a whole pretend shop in our garage, painted cardboard signs, glued fake credit cards onto construction paper, made little menus with markers and tape. Brandon watched me work on it all week. On Saturday, he invited the neighborhood kids over and charged them $2 to shop at his store. He added nothing to it. Just opened the door and collected cash. Mom called him clever. Dad gave him a high five. I was 8. He was 10. I don't think I've ever been angrier in my life. In high school, he got into student council by writing a campaign speech. I helped him edit. I told him to add a joke at the top and a personal story at the end. He won by a landslide. He thanked his team in the morning announcements and winked at me in the hallway. Like that counted as credit. I won a regional art contest that same year and got a nice work text from Mom. No punctuation, no call. Different strikes. They said I don't think Brandon was malicious back then. Not exactly. He was just used to things bending toward him. Doors opened for him without asking. People said yes to him before he finished the question. Me, I was used to staying quiet, to watching him rise, and convincing myself it wasn't a fall I was feeling. Then adulthood happened. He went to business school, of course. I went to community college for design, but dropped out after Sophie was born. I wanted to go back, but tuition wasn't kind to single mothers working 2 jobs. Brandon was already networking with investors by then, building some early prototypes for his innovations. That's what he called them, innovations. Like his whole life was one big tech expo. I still remember the baby shower. Sophie wasn't even born yet, and Brandon gave me a swaddle with his brand logo stitched into the corner. Said it was part of a new line he was testing out. I thanked him and folded it into the diaper bag. It was scratchy and smelled like packaging foam. The snuggle mat was never supposed to be a product. It started because Sophie wouldn't sleep. She was colicky and fussy and inconsolable unless I held her. But I couldn't always hold her. Not when I was trying to eat or answer emails or cry in the bathroom without getting her snot on my shoulder. So I built her something. I used an old quilt, some extra fabric scraps, and a tiny white noise machine I got at a secondhand shop. I stitched in ribbons and textured patches. I patted it to mimic the shape of a cradled arm. I made it soft and weighty, familiar, and it worked. She slept like actually slept. Not a full night, but enough. Enough for me to breathe again. Enough to feel human. I told Brandon about it once on the phone. After he asked how things were going, I said, I think I made something that could help other moms. He laughed and said, That's adorable. I'm sure she loves it. That was it. 2 years later, he launched a product called the Hush Mat. Calming textures, built-in white noise, cradle-shaped design. It was even the same shape, same concept, same function, except his had packaging and a glossy website and influencers holding it like it was the second coming of motherhood. I remember calling him not to fight, just to ask. I said, You remember that mat I made for Sophie? This looks exactly like it. He laughed like I told a joke, then said, Robin, the idea isn't the value, it's the execution. No one was going to buy a stitched-together quilt from a tired mom in a studio apartment. I made it real. He said it so casually like it was a fact, like I should thank him. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just hung up. I showed our parents, or tried to. I printed out screenshots, showed them photos of the mat I'd made for Sophie side by side with Brandon's. Mom blinked. Well, maybe it was a coincidence. Dad said. He's really worked hard, you know. Worked hard. Worked hard collecting venture capital. Worked hard hiring interns to build something he never conceived of. Worked hard calling himself the lead inventor in tech magazines while I was Googling how to keep milk cold on the walk home from the grocery store because our fridge was on its last leg. But yes, let's hear it for the hard work. I think the moment I truly gave up was the Christmas after his company hit its first million. We were all at our parents' house and he gave everyone branded merch in their stockings, hoodies, mugs, even little plush prototypes of the Hushmat line. Sophie held hers up and said, "This looks like the one you made me, Mommy." And Brandon said without blinking, "Oh yeah, that's funny. That's funny." I spent the rest of the day smiling through my teeth. Sophie wore the hoodie home. I didn't take a single photo that Christmas. I told myself I was being dramatic, that it didn't matter, that he'd made it better, maybe that the product helped people, and that was what counted, that the point wasn't credit, it was comfort. And maybe back then I believed it. But when I saw Sophie walk out of that party with her head down, with her dress, the dress I saved for, the dress I believed would make her feel welcome, wrinkled and dismissed, like she was a prop that didn't match the scene, something in me cracked open. Because it wasn't just the party, it was everything. It was every year, every comment, every dismissal. Every time I was asked to shrink while he expanded. And I realized something. Maybe I wasn't over it. Maybe I never had been. Maybe that drawer in my desk hadn't been holding forgotten notes. Maybe it was holding evidence. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay on the couch with a blanket over my legs and the weight of everything else on my chest. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional rustle of Sophie turning in her bed. That drawer had been shut for years, not because I'd forgotten what was inside, but because I remembered too well. The sketches, the stitching diagrams, the voice notes I'd recorded during late-night feedings, the original photos of Sophie, asleep on the first prototype, her gummy smile, her little hand gripping the ribbon I'd sewn on, just for her to fidget with. I looked through them one by one, pages with coffee stains and smudged pencil lines, notes scribbled in the margins, padded edges, heartbeat sound module, test washable cover idea. They weren't glossy. They weren't branded, but they were real. They were mine. And tucked between the pages was the thing that changed everything. A printed email to Brandon, dated almost 8 years ago. I'd written it in the haze of early motherhood, back when I still believed family helped family. "Hey B, do you think something like this could ever be a real product? I made a version for Sophie. Actually works, not fancy, but it helps her sleep. I know you're good at business stuff. Just thought I'd run it by you." Attached was a photo of Sophie fast asleep on the original snuggle mat. His response, "Cute idea. Not sure there's a market for that. Maybe something for Etsy moms." 3 years later he launched the Hushmat. I didn't have money for a lawyer. That was the first problem. The second was time. I didn't have much of that either. Not with work and Sophie and everything else. But something about the weight of that folder in my lap made me feel sharper than I'd felt in years. So, I did what any millennial single mom does when the world screws her over. I Googled intellectual property theft, family DIY invention, no patent. Can I sue? Most of the results were bleak. Ideas aren't protected, they said. Execution matters. Sound familiar? Almost gave up right then. But one link caught my eye. An interview on a small business site with a woman who'd won a settlement after her design was copied by a bigger brand. She'd been laughed out of several offices until one lawyer took her seriously. He saw potential in the documentation. He worked pro bono and they won. At the bottom of the article was his name, Michael C. Landon, IP attorney. I sent him an email, just a short one. No drama, no backstory, just a photo of my sketches, a screenshot of Brandon's product, and the date-stamped email I'd sent him. Subject line: "I think my brother built $1 million company on something I made in my living room." I didn't expect a reply. He responded, "In under 2 hours we met in a coffee shop across town. I wore the nicest blouse I owned, the one with the snag under the arm. That only shows if I reached too high." Michael was in his 30s, wearing jeans and a blazer and the kind of wire-framed glasses that made him look slightly perpetually annoyed. He didn't say much at first, just sifted through my folder like he was looking for something specific. When he found the email, he nodded once and set it aside. "This is strong," he said. And blinked. "Seriously? I can't promise anything," he added, which felt more honest than discouraging. "But yes, this is solid. The email is dated. The photo is dated. You can show that you developed a unique, tangible concept that predated his launch. But I didn't patent it. I didn't trademark anything. You created a working prototype. You documented it. You pitched it. That's more than half of the inventors I work with." I couldn't stop staring at him. "So, you think I have a case?" He leaned back. "I think you have leverage." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, legal language, and strategy meetings that made my head spin. Michael took the case pro bono, explaining that if we won a settlement, he'd take a percentage. If not, well, he'd taken riskier bets before. We filed a demand letter first, not a lawsuit yet, just a carefully worded document outlining my claim that I was the original creator of the product, now marketed as the Hushmat, and that I had time-stamped evidence of both the concept and my communication with Brandon. We included copies of sketches, the original photo, the email, and a side-by-side comparison of my design and his launch version. Michael sent it directly to Brandon's corporate legal office. Then we waited. Brandon called me 3 days later. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Robin, this is insane. You need to call me back. We can talk about this." I didn't call him back. He emailed me next. Forwarded me articles about how ideas can't be owned and how his product had been extensively developed by a team of professionals. Michael read it and chuckled. "He's sweating." I asked how he could tell. "Because if he thought this was nothing, he'd ignore it. He's responding because he knows you're right. And now he's scared it won't stay private." Then came the real shift. Michael forwarded me an email from Brandon's legal team offering to discuss terms of settlement. No admission of guilt, no apology, just money. Quiet money. "They want to make this disappear," Michael said. "They know if this goes public, his reputation takes a hit. Investors panic. Licensing deals freeze. That's a lot of risk. How much are they offering?" Michael read the number. I felt my breath leave my chest. It was more than I'd earned in the last 5 years. And it came with future royalties, percentage royalties, a seat at the table, my name on the patent retroactively filed. Not just a payout, recognition. The only thing they wouldn't offer was a public apology. Too damaging to the brand, they said. I didn't care. They could keep their apology. The morning I signed the agreement, I dropped Sophie off at school in a new coat. Her old one had rips in the sleeves and a zipper that stuck. This one was soft-lined, her favorite color. She twirled in it before she walked inside. That night I paid off every credit card. I filled the fridge. I fixed the leak under the sink. That had been dripping since April. I stood in the middle of our kitchen and breathed. It still smelled like lemon cupcakes from the party. Only this time I didn't feel small. I felt like the beginning of something. The story leaked 3 days after I signed the settlement papers. I didn't leak it. Neither did my lawyer. But someone on Brandon's side clearly did. Probably trying to control the narrative before it controlled him. Too late. The headlines practically wrote themselves. Toy mogul sister wins settlement after claiming he stole her invention. The comments weren't kind. At first, Brandon went radio silent. Then came the damage control, a glossy press statement full of vague phrases like miscommunication between family members and mutual respect despite differences. He didn't use my name once, didn't acknowledge what he'd done. I didn't expect him to. What I didn't expect was the phone call from my mother. "You went too far," she said. No greeting. I stared at the phone like it might apologize for her. "Excuse me. Brandon's a public figure," she snapped. "You should have handled this privately. You've humiliated your family." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but it was absurd. "He stole from me for years. He built that company from nothing," she said. "You think an old sketch in a drawer makes you a CEO?" "No," I said calmly, "but apparently it makes me a co-creator." She didn't like that. I could hear it in the pause, in the sharp inhale, like she was going to say something cutting, but hadn't picked which word to weaponize yet. Then you've always been jealous of him. Hung up. Not out of rage, just preservation. 2 days later I got a group text from my parents. Family dinner Sunday. Would like to move past all this. Bring Sophie. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a command disguised as an invitation. I stared at it for a long time, then replied, "Just me." Brandon opened the door, wearing a quarter-zip sweater and the kind of forced smile people wear when they're trying not to look like they're unraveling. He'd lost weight. Or maybe he just stopped standing as tall. It's hard to tell when someone who's always been bulletproof suddenly realizes they're not. "Robin," he said like we were friends meeting for coffee. "Brandon." He stepped aside to let me in. The house was still obnoxious. Walls that looked like Pinterest boards. Furniture no one ever sat in. An entryway that smelled like expensive soap and ego. But there was something brittle about it now. Like it could all crack under the wrong pressure. Mom greeted me at the table with an air kiss and a plate already waiting. "Roast chicken," she said. "Your favorite." It wasn't. Dad nodded stiffly. No one mentioned the lawsuit. No one asked how Sophie was. They talked about local politics and a new wine subscription Brandon had invested in like none of it had happened. Halfway through dinner, Brandon cleared his throat. "I think we should all be grateful," he said, slicing into his chicken like it had personally offended him. "Things could have gone a lot worse." "Could they?" I said, folding my napkin slowly. He looked up. "I gave you a great deal." Smiled. "You gave me what I was owed." He laughed. "You really think a homemade mat and a few doodles are worth a stake in a multi-million-dollar company? You didn't think that 6 weeks ago when your lawyers were begging to keep this quiet." The silence at the table was thick. Mom sipped her wine like it was oxygen. Dad cleared his throat. Brandon's smile wavered. "I made it successful," he muttered. "Not you. I did the work." "Then you should have given credit where it was due. But I guess it's hard to share the spotlight when you've convinced everyone. You built it from nothing." He pushed his plate away. "You just wanted to humiliate me." "No," I said. "But that's a nice bonus." After dinner, Mom pulled me aside into the hallway. Her grip on my arm wasn't tight, but it was firm enough to make it clear. This wasn't just a chat. "You've made your point," she said. "Now it's time to let it go." I stared at her. She looked so tired. Not in the way age makes you tired, more like the way denial does, like holding up the same lie for decades. Finally starts to sag in your hands. "You think this was about proving a point?" "Yes." "You embarrassed him, Robin. You embarrassed all of us." I let out a breath that tasted like every time I'd bitten my tongue around this woman. "Do you hear yourself?" said. "He stole from me, lied to everyone, and I'm the one who embarrassed you." She crossed her arms. "You could have come to us. We could have settled this as a family." "I did come to you," I snapped. "Years ago I showed you everything. And you told me I was being jealous." Her eyes narrowed 'cause that's what it looked like. "Brandon was working, building something, and you were struggling, right? And struggling people don't get to be believed." She didn't deny it, just tilted her head slightly, the way she does when she's trying to stay composed, but still win the argument. "You don't understand the pressure your brother's under. He has a public image, investors, a family to support." "So did I said. "I just didn't have a PR team to spin my story." She blinked. That landed harder than I expected. For a second she looked like she might actually hear me. Then she straightened her shoulders. "You've always had a chip on your shoulder, Robin." I nodded slowly. "Maybe. Or maybe I've just been carrying everything you refuse to see." I didn't wait for her to respond. I just turned and walked out of that perfect hallway in that perfect house with its perfect lies. And this time I didn't look back. 3 weeks later, I signed a lease in a different city. Not for a fresh start, just a clean one. A place where no one would ask me to shrink so someone else could shine. Robin. A place where Sophie could twirl in a frog print dress and no one would blink. When I told her we were moving, she asked, "Will it be quieter there?" I said, "Only in the best ways." She smiled and went to pack her stuffed animals. The invitation arrived the day after we moved. Thick cardstock gold foil. Brandon's daughter turning 9. Same house. Sophie asked. He nodded. Do I have to go? Only if you want to. She looked down at the RSVP card, then ripped it in half. I'd rather go somewhere. People don't care what dress I wear. And just like that, she freed herself from something I'd spent my whole life trying to explain. The next morning, she walked into her new school wearing neon leggings, a rainbow hoodie, and glitter on her eyelids. She turned around before going in and said, "Is this okay?" Smiled. "It's perfect because now we don't need their rooms to shine anymore." Some days I wonder if my daughter hadn't cried in the car that day. Would I have ever opened that drawer? What would you have done in my place? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories like